Chapter 2, Unrequited Love. Caron rested his head against Grimory's shoulder and he sighed with exhaustion. Unlike other armors, the armor in Anis felt worn to the touch. After a short walk, Grimory succeeded in getting poor Caron home. He did not depart right away. He wanted to show Caron his true face. On impulse, Caron wrapped his arm around Grimory's neck and he stood on his tippy toes in order to kiss the man he loved. Grimory stood still like a statue. Smiling, Caron said, "Grimory, I love you. Yes, I have loved you since I saw you in the battlefield." Caron then proceeded to list other ways that Grimory epitomized knighthood and gallantry. Grimory took a deep breath and another, and Caron foolishly believed that his confession was having the intended effect. And after hearing Caron's love confession, Grimory said, "You are a fool, Caron. Yes, I am a strong warrior, but not by calling, but by necessity. I fought so that my friends and family would not die. And since Sofina came out with his farce, everything is Grimory this, Grimory that. Oh, Mr. Grimory, you're such a gallant knight. Everyone wants me to do everything for them. And you, Caron, never once have you asked me how I'm doing, if I'm in pain, if I am suffering. The Grimory you want doesn't exist." He gave an exaggerated bow before departing, and he said, "Good day to you, sir." This remark struck Caron like a bucket of cold water, and it took him a moment to process everything that Grimory had said. He ran in the direction that Grimory had gone, and when he could not find him, he yelled, "Grimory, I'm sorry." Grimory made his way towards the cliff, and he sat down at the edge to see the waves crashing against the pointing rocks below. He sat there waiting for some semblance of peace to return. Through the sound of the crashing waves, he heard someone slowly approaching. The familiar voice whispered, "Gregory?" Grimory jumped off the cliff holding onto his sides, and from his back grew two large wings as black as night, and the outdraft from the cliff gave him altitude, and he flew about searching for the source of the voice, but he could not find it. Grimory flew from the cliff back to the sacred mass guild, and he entered the room that belonged to Gregory, and after shedding his black armor, Grimory looked at his own face in the mirror, and only outside the armor could Gregory be his true self, and removing the armor was not enough to calm his frayed nerves. Eric, who had managed to fall asleep again, was immediately awoken by Gregory's scream, and as a small child, Gregory had been prone to fits of hysteria, and Eric was quickly joined by Sofina, and together they entered Gregory's room to see the severity of the fit, and Gregory was punching and scratching the floor and breaking just about every piece of furniture in his room, which was not much as a precaution for the eventuality of a fit. And Eric held on to his friend while he said soothing voice, and Greg heard nothing, and he only felt that somebody was restraining him to keep him from repeatedly smashing his face against the mirror. And after an hour like this, Sofina said to Eric, "And how long do you plan to wait?" "I think it's almost over. Just give him a few more minutes to regain his composure," said Eric, who was still restraining Gregory. At sunrise, Gregory's cries of desperation changed to sobs, and eventually he calmed down. Sofina passed her hand through her pink hair, and sighing, she told Gregory, "Gee, if you wanted to stop playing Grimory, you could have done so at any point. No need to throw a tantrum. Sweet baby Jesus, I have a headache. Good night, guys." Eric nodded in response, and he gingerly carried Gregory, and he placed him on the bed, and after prepping the pillows and closing the blinds, Eric set about tending to Gregory's self-inflicted wounds. He cleaned Gregory's hands and face, and he bandaged up his arms. He then set about cleaning up the room. Eric looked at one of the few remaining shards of the mirror, and he saw that Gregory had broken his nose. Eric also had a lot of bruises on his own torso and arms. Caron entered his bedroom exhausted after his meeting with Gregory, and in his Grimory persona, and he removed his attire and he lay down to process everything that had occurred before he realized that he had fallen asleep. And after sleeping for less than half an hour, Caron awoke because he heard the sound of a crying baby in his sleep. And he got up and he put it on the nightgown to check up on the kid. And when he opened the door to the nursery, he saw that it was empty. Sighing, Caron closed the door and returned to his bed. Once again, he had been reminded that poor Charlie was dead. The sun rose and Caron had only gotten a half an hour of sleep, and he made the effort to rest a little more. And he turned to his side to see the clock, and it was half an hour before breakfast. Languidly, Caron rose from bed and he went to the bathroom. And the manor had working plumbing made of copper, and this bathroom came with both a tub and a shower. The shower was freestanding and separated by a marble block to funnel the water into the sink, and the walls were decorated with white tiles with blue swirling patterns, and behind a glass frame was the lithograph of Grimory. While Caron bathed, he pondered on what little he knew of the man hiding inside the black armor of Inanis. And Grimory's books only talked about his heroic exploits or his romantic misadventures. Caron left his bath and he wore the first thing that fell out of his closet. He went downstairs to eat breakfast with his brother, Bron, Alisa, and his wife and his adopted father, Siegfried. Siegfried was 765 years old and had lost most of his mobility after his wife's death. Siegfried had eyes the same color as Caron, and his hair was by now ashen color, and his wrinkled face looked homely and peaceful, almost as if he was waiting for the sweet relief of death. The former Magus had dried up like a twig after his wife's death, and even more after losing his first grandson, and he now required a wheelchair to get about. Siegfried looked upon Caron's face and he smiled. "Good morning, my son," said Lord Siegfried. After Caron sat down to eat, Bron shortly arrived with his wife Alisa. Alisa had amber skin, blonde hair, and honeyed eyes, and her most distinguished feature were her comically large elven ears. Lord Siegfried greeted Bron by saying, "Good morning, son." "Madam?" The maid came with breakfast, and Caron barely nibbled at his bacon, and he did not eat his eggs, though he did absentmindedly stab at them with his fork, and it was then when he noticed the headlines on the newspaper that Bron was reading. Bron, laughing, exclaimed, "So they finally retired Grimory." "Retired?" asked Caron, confused. "It says here that he died fighting a dragon in order to save a damsel in distress," said Bron, chuckling. Caron took the newspaper from his brother, and he saw the lithograph depicting Grimory fighting the dragon. "Is this some type of joke, brother?" asked Caron, alarmed. "What? You really thought Grimory was a real person, and I have phonetics that he's played by a bunch of different people who are compatible with the black armor Inanis," explained Bron. "Was everything in those books a lie?" asked Caron. "Only the name and his backstory is a lie. And I fought beside the Black Knight, and he's a real person, but he keeps his true identity a secret because Wodanite wants him dead," said Bron, explaining things to his little brother. "And according to the rumor mill, Grimory is physically no longer able to wear his armor. He got injured in his duel against Wodanite's ogre champion, and he never truly recovered. And Sophia pays him part of the book profits to that poor wounded hero, so that poor wounded hero doesn't starve to death." When I was put in the black armor, Gregory was a teacher, and he's a magic to novice mages of the guild, and even Caron would sometimes study under Gregory. And despite being an adept teacher, Gregory was terrible at spellcasting, and the official excuse was that Gregory suffered from chronic magic fatigue syndrome. I made up an illness created by Sophina, who had a clever answer to every question, and the time of his lesson varied greatly depending on his mood, and he was knowledgeable in the craft, so his students tolerated his eccentricities. The advanced classes were given by Allan, the son of the Arch Magus Helmer. Allan's face had refined features that contrasted with his beefcake body, short black hair, and spiteful green eyes. His ears were imperceptibly pointing, thus hinting at his elven heritage. Allan and his sister Marina were Eddie's adopted children. Caron left his son to go play chess with Gregory, and they had gotten into the habit of playing again before starting their daily routines. Caron sat down in the Iron Park chair, and he checked his pocket watch, and he saw that Gregory was 15 minutes late. Gregory had never missed a play there with Caron, and it was then when he noticed a little kid wandering about by himself, and he was being trailed by two men in traveling coats. Caron sprang into action, and he came to the kid and he said, "Charlie, don't wander off by yourself." The little lord seemed to recognize Caron, and going along with the rules, the kid said, "I'm sorry, father, I saw a frog and I wanted to show it to you." Caron took the kid's hand and he guided him to the park table, and Caron asked, "Aren't you a little young to be wandering about by yourself? It is the summertime, and travelers from all over the continent are coming to Allan, and you never know if you run into a thief or something worse." The kid looked at Caron with curiosity and he asked, "What is worse than a thief?" "Like a scary monster," lied Caron, trying to undo the thoughtless thing he thought he had said. Caron looked at the boy's face intently, and there was something very familiar about the kid, and after looking at him for a bit, the light of recognition fell upon him. The boy was a mini Gregory. He had his father's short brown hair and brown eyes, the same childish nose, the delicate features, and the same taciturn expressions and mannerisms. Caron said to the kid, "You are a Gregory's kid, are you not?" "Took you long enough to recognize me, Caron," said little Julian. Julian's family life was a complicated one, and his mother was married to another man, and Julian had never thought much on his family situation till he started going to school, and the students called him a bastard, despite the fact that his father had given Julian his last name, Dragosesti. The house of the Dragosesti nobility claimed to be descendants of dragons, and Julian never spoke of the teasing he endured in school on account of the fact that he had two fathers but only one mother. Caron saw Allan passing by, and Allan noticed Caron talking with Julian. Allan came to Caron and he asked, "What is Julian doing here?" "Why don't you ask him?" said Caron, and thinking he added, "Isn't today summer camp or something? Did you skip because the kids are picking on you again?" Julian did not answer, and Allan looked at the back of Julian's head intently, and nodding, Allan said, "Take Julian back to his mother. I am going to have a talk with his teacher." After saying this, Allan disappeared. And Caron couldn't help but comment, "He really is a talented mind reader, isn't he?" "Allan should mind his own business," said Julian, "and Father's going to cry when he hears that Allan was visiting my school again." "Does Allan make your father cry often?" asked Caron. "Yes, very often." "More so lately," said Julian. "Does Allan hurt your father?" asked Caron, narrowing his eyes. "Father says no, but I have seen bruises," said Julian. "And I asked Father about it, and he says that Allan hugs him a little too tight and that I shouldn't worry about it. Allan says that he dies with my father every so often, and their dinner parties is part of the reason why my dad is sometimes a little worse for wear." "Oh," said Caron, laughing, remembering Allan's favorite euphemism for making love. And he added, "I wasn't aware that they were together." "They're just friends," said Julian dryly. "Best friends with benefits." "What benefits does my father have with Allan?" "I'm taking you home now," said Caron to avoid the awkward conversation. "Today you play chess with my father. Play with me instead, and if you beat me, you can take me home," insisted Julian. Caron noticed Julian digging his nails into the chair, and taking him home by force was not an option, and not knowing how to manage the situation, Caron agreed to the terms of the duel. Alright, that's the end of that chapter. Bye-bye and God bless.